concerning the Greek words used to refer to a burial place or tomb. A.T. Robertson in Word Pictures in the New Testament 1932, Volume V, p. 87 states. Defoe's grave presents the notion of burial thapto, to bury as in mat. 23. 27. Namaon from Naamai, Mimsko, to remind is a memorial, sepulchre as a monument. Related to Namaon is the word emenima, which appears to have a corresponding meaning, referring also to a memorial or record of a thing or a dead person, then a sepulchral monument, and hence a tomb. Vine's Expository Dictionary of Old and New Testament Words, 1981, Volume 2, p. 173. Such a tomb might be an excavated grave in the ground or, as was often the case among the Hebrews, might be a natural cave or a rock-cut vault. Compare Acts 7. 16 and GE 23. 19, 20. As has been seen above, whereas the word Tapho's grave gives emphasis to the idea of burial, the words Emenima tomb and Emeni middle.Maon memorial tomb lay stress on the thought of preserving the memory of the deceased person. These latter words, therefore, appear to carry a greater idea of permanence than Tapho's. They are related to the Latin word monumentum. It seems evident that Jewish burial tombs were customarily built outside the cities, a major exception being those of the kings. The references to such tombs in the Christian Greek scriptures would all appear to place them outside the cities, except the reference to David's tomb at Acts 2. 29. Being thus withdrawn and also being avoided by the Jews, because of the ceremonial uncleanness connected with them, the areas in which such tombs were located were at times the haunt of crazed or demonized persons. Mount 8. 28. Mr. 5. 5. Not on 8. While serving as a remembrance of the deceased person, the Jewish memorial tombs in general do not appear to have been ornate or ostentatious. Some were so unpretentious and inconspicuous that men might walk upon them without being aware of it. Lu 11. 44. Although it was the custom of the pagan peoples around them to make their tombs as lavish as their circumstances allowed, the early Jewish tombs that have been found are notable for their simplicity. It was because the Jews' worship allowed no veneration of the dead and did not foster any ideas of a conscious existence after death in a spirit world, ideas such as those held by the Egyptians, Canaanites, and Babylonians. Thus, while many critics make the claim that the worship of the nation of Israel was, from early times, syncretistic, that is, resulting from the union of conflicting beliefs and having developed by the addition of tenets and practices from earlier religions, the fundamental resistance to such religious corruption is evidenced once again in the plainness of their tombs. Deviations, however, did occur. Jesus shows that in his day it was the practice of the scribes and Pharisees to decorate the memorial tombs of the prophets and others. Mount 23. 29, 30. Under Greek and Roman influence, the tendency among the wealthy at that time was toward more pretentious tombs. Aside from the tomb of John the Baptist, Mr. 6. 29. The principal tombs considered in the Christian Greek scriptures are those of Lazarus and of Jesus. Lazarus' tomb was typically Jewish, being a cave with a stone lying against the opening, which opening may have been relatively small, if we conclude that similar tombs found in Palestine are comparable. The context would indicate it was outside the village. Joe 11. O textoi acute muritra longo. Memphis 369 tombs that were opened as the result of an earthquake occurring at the time of Jesus' death has caused considerable discussion, some holding that a resurrection occurred. However, a comparison with the texts concerning the resurrection makes clear that these verses do not describe a resurrection, but merely a throwing of bodies out of their tombs, similar to incidents that have taken place in more recent times, as in Ecuador in 1949 and again in Sunzon, Colombia, in 1962, when 200 corpses in the cemetery were thrown out of their tombs by a violent earth tremor. El Tiempo, Bogotá, Colombia, July 31, 1962. Remembrance by God. In view of the underlying thought of remembrance associated with Emeni middle.Maon, the use of this word rather than tar-phos at John 5. 28 with regard to the resurrection of all those in the memorial tomb seems particularly appropriate and contrasts sharply with the thought of complete repudiation and effacement from all memory as represented by Gehenna. Mount 10. 28. 23. 33. Mr. 9. 43. The importance attached to burial by the Hebrews. See burial. Burial places is indicative of their concern that they be remembered, primarily by Jehovah God in whom they had faith as the rewarder of those earnestly seeking him. Heb 11. 1, 2, 6 inscriptions of the tombs of Israelite origin are very rare and, when found, often consist of only the name. The outstanding kings of Judah left no magnificent monuments with their praises and exploits engraved thereon, as did the kings of other nations. Thus it seems evident that the concern of faithful men of ancient times was that their name be in the book of remembrance described at Malachi 3. 16. Compare EC 7. 1. See name. The basic idea of remembrance involved in the original Greek words for tomb or memorial tomb also gives added meaning to the plea of the evildoer impaled alongside Jesus to remember me when you get into your kingdom. Lu 23. 42. Memphis. One of the capitals of ancient Egypt, identified with the ruins at Metrine, about 23 kilometers 14 miles of Cairo, on the W side of the Nile River. Memphis was for long the most important city in Lower Egypt, that is, the Delta region and a small section to the east thereof. At Hosea 9. 6 the city is called Meph in the Hebrew text, rendered Memphis in most English translations. Elsewhere it is referred to by the Hebrew Neph. Issa 19. 13. J2. 16. 44. 1. 46. 14. 19. As 30. 13. 16. History. According to legend, recounted by Greek historian Herodotus 2, 99, Memphis was established by a ruler named Mans. No historical evidence has been found, however, for this supposed founder of the first dynasty of Egyptian rulers. Memphis' geographic situation was ideally suited for a capital city of this land of the Nile. Lying just a little south of the apex of the delta, that is, the point where the Nile River divides up into its branches, it could exercise control not only over the delta region to the north but also over the traffic on the Nile. Desert and mountains made difficult any approach to the city from the W, and the Nile itself and the hills beyond served as a protection from the E. Thus, Memphis, on the border between upper southern and lower northern Egypt, anciently held the key to all Egypt, much as modern Cairo does today in a nearby location. Commercial. The city was a great commercial center throughout its history, declining only after the Greek conquest, when Alexandria on the northern coast became the country's most thriving port. According to some historians, Memphis became widely reputed for its glass manufacture, Rome being a principal importer of its wares. Acacia trees were also cultivated in the area to supply wood for making furniture, ships for Egypt's navy, and military weapons. Politically, also, Memphis held great prominence, particularly during the period Egyptologists call the Old Kingdom o Textoi Acute Muritra Longo. Memphis 370 accompanied by mourning. Compare to Kai 2. 23. Issa 22. 12. In the case of both the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom Judah, Egypt, as here represented by Memphis and Tabans, proved to be a futile source of hope for aid and support, while at the same time showing itself ready to exploit God's covenant people for selfish advantage. Ho 7. 11. Issa 30. 1-3. 2 Kai 23. 31-35. Religious. Memphis was a center of religion and of learning in Egypt, but back in the 8th century BCE Isaiah foretold that the vaunted wisdom of the princes, perhaps priestly princes of Memphis, would fail and Egypt would be misled. Issa 19. 13 Such counselors evidently fostered a false sense of security in Egypt as regards the aggressive power of Assyria. Memorials of Ethiopian King Tirhakah's reign over Egypt have been found at Memphis. Though Tirhakah managed to survive his encounter with Assyrian King Sennacherib in Canaan 732 BCE to Kai 19. 9, Sennacherib's son Esarhaddon later shattered the Egyptian army, forcing them to retreat to Memphis. Esarhaddon's own record of the subsequent conflict reads: I laid siege to Memphis, his Tirhakah's royal residence, and conquered it in half a day by means of mines, breaches and assault ladders. I destroyed it, tore down its walls and burnt it down. Ancient Near Eastern Texts, edited by J. Pritchard, 1974, p. 293. Apparently a few years later Egypt's forces retook Memphis, massacring the Assyrian garrison. But Ashurbanipal, son of Esarhaddon, marched into Egypt and drove the rulers out of Memphis and back up the Nile southward. When Assyria went into decline in the latter part of the 7th century BCE, Memphis came back under full Egyptian control. Following the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar's desolation of Judah in 607 BCE, Jewish refugees fled into Egypt, taking up residence in Memphis and other cities. Jah 44. 1. Through his prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel, Jehovah condemned them to disaster and foretold that Nebuchadnezzar would strike Egypt a devastating blow, with Memphis not experiencing the full force of the attack. Jah 44. 11-14. 46. 13, 14, 19. As 30. 10-13. The Babylonian attackers of Memphis would confidently attack the city in broad daylight. As 30. 16. Memphis again came in for a severe defeat at the hands of Persian king Cambyses in 525 BCE, thereafter becoming the seat of a Persian satrapy. The city never fully recovered from the effects of this conquest. With the rise of Alexandria under the Ptolemies, Memphis declined steadily and by the 7th century of the Common Era had become vast ruins. Memphis was among the foremost sacred cities of ancient Egypt, along with nearby Heliopolis. Ge 41. 50. Especially important were the shrines dedicated to the Godda and to the sacred bull Apis. The Godda, according to the Memphite theology devised by the priests of Memphis, was the creator, sharing this distinction with other gods such as Thoth, Ra, and Osiris, and his mythological activity apparently was modeled on the actual role of the pharaoh in human affairs. Classical historians describe the Temple of Ra at Memphis as being periodically enlarged and beautified. Enormous statues adorned it. The Apis bull, a specially marked live bull, was kept at Memphis and worshipped